Welcome to today's video. We're about to embark on a powerful journey that begins with joy, dips into the depths of heartache, and rises again to find hope. This is the story of Sophie, a courageous mother who faced unimaginable challenges but never wavered in her love and dedication to her son, William. From the excitement of preparing for his arrival to the heartbreak of being abandoned by the one she loved, Sophie's story is one of resilience, love, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. But it's also a story that shows how even in the darkest times, there's always a glimmer of hope, and with that hope, the possibility of new beginnings. Stay with us as we explore the twists and turns of Sophie's journey and discover how she finds the strength to build a brighter future. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. In a world where reality often blurs the lines of understanding, a black woman brought a white child into the world, a moment of pure joy that soon became tainted by a cruel twist of fate. Years later, as she lay in a cold hospital bed, her husband abandoned her, leaving her to confront the harshness of life alone. But that morning, Sophie felt none of that heartache. She awoke with a heart brimming with anticipation and hope, her emotions swirling like a storm inside her. Carefully, she slipped out of bed, taking extra care not to rouse Sam, who remained lost in the peaceful depths of sleep beside her. With a mixture of excitement and apprehension, Sophie tiptoed to the room that would soon cradle her son William's dreams. The space stood before her like a silent promise, its blank white walls whispering of endless possibilities. A gentle smile tugged at her lips as she envisioned the room bursting with love, warmth, and color, a sanctuary for her beloved child. In her mind's eye, the room transformed. A snug crib stood in one corner, waiting to cradle William's tender form. A rocking chair sat nearby, where countless nights would be spent soothing his tiny cries, and the shelves were brimming with stories yet to be told, with toys that would soon bring laughter and light into their home. Sophie's heart swelled with a mother's love, imagining all the memories they would create in this space. Her reverie was gently interrupted by the sound of Sam's footsteps as he entered the room, stretching and yawning away the last remnants of sleep. "Morning, love," he murmured, his voice still husky as he wrapped his strong arms around her, pressing a soft kiss to her cheek, already thinking about how to make this space perfect for our little one. Meant to be. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but Sophie was determined to face whatever came next with the same strength and courage that had carried her through the darkest days. She looked down at William, who was now toddling toward her with a smile that could melt the hardest heart, and she smiled back, a new sense of peace settling over her. "Come on, my love," she said softly, reaching out to take his tiny hand. "Let's go home." And as they walked away, hand in hand, Sophie knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she and William would face them together with an unbreakable love. Sam moved like a ghost, his actions mechanical and devoid of the warmth Sophie had once known. As he methodically packed a small bag, Sophie watched, helpless and heartbroken. Each movement he made was like a dagger to her heart, a painful reminder that the man she loved was slipping further away. When he finally stopped, he turned to face her, his eyes empty, his expression unreadable. "Come with me," he said, his voice hollow, almost robotic. "You and the baby. I'll take you to a place where you can stay for a while, until I can figure this out." Sophie's heart pounded with fear and desperation. She didn't understand what was happening, but the coldness in Sam's voice left her with little choice. She quickly packed a few essentials for herself and William, her hands trembling as she tried to gather her thoughts. She couldn't shake the sense of dread that hung over her like a dark cloud, but she followed Sam out of the house, clinging to the hope that maybe, just maybe, this nightmare would soon be over. The drive through the forest was suffocatingly silent, the tension between them palpable. The only sounds were the steady hum of the engine and William's occasional soft whimpers from his car seat. Sophie held her son tightly, her mind racing with unanswered questions and dark fears about what lay ahead. Sam drove with an intensity that frightened her, his knuckles white as they gripped the steering wheel. He seemed lost in his world, detached from the reality of what was happening. Eventually, the car came to a stop in a desolate clearing, surrounded by dark, foreboding woods. Sophie's unease grew as she looked around, seeing nothing but the oppressive shadow of the trees closing in on them. "Wait here," Sam ordered, his voice sharp and distant. "I need to get something. I won't be long." Confusion and fear surged through Sophie as she watched him get out of the car. "Sam, what's going on? Why are we here?" she called after him, her voice trembling. But Sam didn't respond. He walked into the dense forest without a backward glance, leaving Sophie alone in the car with William. She watched him disappear into the trees, her anxiety mounting with each passing second. The minutes dragged on, and Sam still didn't return. William began to cry, his tiny voice echoing in the eerie silence of the clearing. Sophie tried to calm him, rocking him gently, as she whispered reassurances she didn't truly believe. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice thick with fear. "Daddy will be back soon. Everything's going to be fine." But as the minutes stretched into an hour, doubt began to creep in. Sophie's heart raced with a growing sense of dread. She couldn't just sit there any longer. She needed to find Sam, to understand what was happening. Holding William close, she got out of the car and began to pace, her mind spinning with thoughts of what she should do. Then, suddenly, she heard the distant roar of an engine starting up. Her heart sank. "Sam," she screamed, her voice laced with panic as she ran toward the sound. "Sam, wait." She reached the edge of the clearing just in time to see another car pulling away, disappearing into the distance. The reality of what was happening hit her like a physical blow. Sam was leaving them. He was abandoning her and their child in the middle of nowhere. Sophie's world shattered at that moment, her breath catching in her throat as she realized the full extent of his betrayal. A strangled sob escaped her lips, her legs giving way beneath her as she collapsed to the ground, clutching William to her chest. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered in disbelief, "How could you, Sam? How could you do this to us?" The only response was the oppressive silence of the forest, broken only by William's soft cries. Sophie felt her heart breaking under the weight of her despair, but as she looked down at her son, something inside her shifted. The helplessness she had felt moments before began to give way to a fierce resolve. She couldn't afford to break down now. William needed her. She had to find the strength to keep going, to find a way out of this nightmare. With shaking legs, Sophie forced herself to stand, holding William close to her heart. She looked around, trying to gather her bearings, but all she could see were endless trees stretching in every direction. She had no idea where they were or how far they were from civilization, but she knew staying there wasn't an option. "We're going to be okay, William," she whispered, her voice still trembling but now tinged with determination. "I'll take care of you, no matter what. I promise." Sophie took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. She knew she had to be strong, not just for herself but for her son. With William in her arms, she began to walk, not knowing where she was headed, but knowing that she had no choice but to keep moving forward. The forest loomed around them, dark and menacing, but Sophie refused to give in to the fear. She would find a way out. She had to. And so with every step she took, Sophie fought against the overwhelming sense of betrayal and abandonment, focusing instead on the one thing that mattered most: her son. No matter how alone and frightened she felt, she knew she had to survive for him, to protect him from the harsh reality of the world they were now facing. She was determined to find a way to rebuild their lives, even if it meant starting over from nothing. As they walked through the dense, silent forest, Sophie whispered to William, "I'll never leave you, my sweet boy." We'll get through this together. I promise you that." And though the road ahead was uncertain and filled with unknown dangers, Sophie found a glimmer of hope in the bond she shared with her son. It was that hope that would carry them through the darkest of times, guiding them toward a future that, while different from what she had once dreamed, was still worth fighting for. Sophie took one step forward, then another, each one more determined than the last. With every step, she felt a new strength growing inside her, an unbreakable resolve hardening in her heart. She would walk until her legs could no longer carry her. She would fight until her last breath. No matter what it took, she would protect her son. Because that's what a mother does, she thought. She was William's mother, and nothing, not the cruelty of the world, not even Sam's betrayal, could take that from her. She wandered through the forest for what felt like hours, the dense canopy above casting eerie shadows on the ground. The weight of exhaustion bore down on her, her body aching, her mind a fog of fatigue and despair. William had stopped crying, but his silence gnawed at her, fueling her fears. Just as she began to feel the last threads of hope slipping away, a distant sound pierced the stillness, a bark, clear and sharp. Then, the sound of footsteps crunching on leaves, followed by a voice calling out, "Hello, is anyone there?" Sophie's heart leaped in her chest, a flood of relief washing over her. "Here," she cried, her voice raspy from thirst and the strain of emotion. "We're here." Out of the trees emerged a figure, an older woman with a weathered but kind face, her eyes widening with surprise and concern as she took in the sight of Sophie and the baby. A sturdy dog stood at her side, its eyes keenly observing the strangers. "My goodness, child," the woman exclaimed, hurrying towards Sophie. "What happened to you? Are you all right?" Sophie tried to respond, but the words caught in her throat, and instead, a sob escaped her lips. Without hesitation, the woman wrapped her arms around Sophie, holding her close, yet mindful of William. There she soothed, gently patting Sophie's back. "You're safe now. We'll take care of you, don't you worry." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Charlotte, led Sophie through the forest, speaking softly as they walked. She reassured Sophie with every step, her voice a balm to Sophie's frayed nerves. The dog, Max, stayed close, his presence a quiet comfort. After a short walk, they reached a small, welcoming cabin nestled among the trees, its appearance cozy and well-kept. Inside, Mrs. Charlotte guided Sophie to a chair by the fire and insisted she sit while she prepared some food. Max curled up at Sophie's feet, offering his silent companionship as the warmth of the fire began to seep into her weary bones. The aroma of homemade soup soon filled the room, bringing with it a sense of peace Sophie hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. "Here you go, dear Mrs. Charlotte said, placing a steaming bowl of soup in front of Sophie. "Eat up, and then we can talk if you're ready. I can see you've been through something awful." Sophie hesitated, the weight of her story pressing heavily on her chest. The pain, the shame, the fear, it all felt too raw, too overwhelming. But something in Mrs. Charlotte's gentle, understanding eyes urged her to speak, to release the burden she'd been carrying alone. Slowly, the words began to pour out, tumbling over one another in a rush of emotion. She spoke of Sam, of their once beautiful love, the dreams they'd shared, the joy of William's birth, and then the nightmare that followed Sam's reaction, the harsh accusations, the growing rift, and finally, the moment that broke her heart, being abandoned. Left defenseless and alone in the middle of nowhere. Mrs. Charlotte listened without interruption, her face a mixture of empathy and quiet strength. When Sophie finally fell silent, her tears spent, Mrs. Charlotte reached across the table and took her hand, her grip warm and reassuring. "What he did to you is unforgivable, Mrs. Charlotte said, her voice steady and full of compassion. "But you need to know that you're not alone, Sophie. I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to be abandoned, to be left to fend for yourself when you thought you had someone to rely on. But listen to me, you're stronger than you realize, and you're not alone anymore." Sophie looked up at her, surprised by the intensity in her voice and the depth of understanding in her eyes. How did you survive?" she asked, her voice a mere whisper. "Mrs." Charlotte smiled gently, a sad yet resolute smile. "It wasn't easy," she admitted. "But I found strength in the love I had for my children and in the knowledge that I deserved better, that they deserved better. And so do you, Sophie. You've been through hell, but you're still standing, still fighting for your son. That's what matters." Sophie felt a flicker of hope ignite within her, fragile but real. For the first time since Sam had left, she didn't feel completely lost. She had found a small refuge in this kind stranger's cabin, a place where she could begin to rebuild the pieces of her shattered life. "Thank you," Sophie whispered, tears filling her eyes once again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "Thank you for helping us." "The Mrs." Charlotte squeezed her hand, her smile warm and encouraging. "You're going to be okay, Sophie. It's going to be a long road, but you're not walking it alone. And remember, no matter what, you're a good mother. You're doing the best you can for William, and that's more than enough." As Sophie sat there, cradling William in her arms, she felt the weight of her fear and despair begin to lift, replaced by a quiet resolve. She knew the challenges ahead were daunting, but with Mrs. Charlotte's support and her inner strength, she felt ready to face them. She was William's mother, and she would do whatever it took to keep him safe and give him the life he deserved. For the first time in a long while, Sophie allowed herself to believe that they would be okay, that she and William could still find happiness, even in a world that had turned so cruel. Mrs. Charlotte's voice, gentle yet resonant with past sorrow, continued to weave the story of her own life, a young, passionate marriage filled with dreams that eventually crumbled under the weight of broken promises. "I remember waking up one morning to find him gone," she said, her eyes growing distant as if she could still see that painful day. "He took everything with him, everything but this cabin. I thought my life had ended right there, but somehow I found a way to carry on. I discovered a strength within myself that I never knew existed. And just like I did, you will find that strength too." Tears welled up in Sophie's eyes, but they were different this time. They were tears of gratitude, of connection, of finding a kindred spirit in the most unexpected of places. Here, in this secluded cabin in the forest, she had not only found shelter from the storm that was her life, but also understanding, perhaps even the faint glimmer of hope she had thought was lost forever. "Mrs." Charlotte reached out and squeezed Sophie's hand, her grip warm and steady. "You can stay here as long as you need," she offered, her voice filled with kindness. "You and William. This can be your home now if you want it to be." Sophie looked around the cozy cabin, at the fire crackling warmly in the hearth, at the handmade quilts draped over the chairs, at the shelves lined with books and mementos of a life well lived. She glanced at Mrs. Charlotte's face, which bore the marks of time and struggle, yet radiated a serene strength. And she thought about the uncertain, frightening world outside, a world that had once been her own but now seemed distant and uninviting. Sophie knew she had to navigate that world alone now, but as she looked down at William, sleeping peacefully in her arms, she realized that perhaps she wasn't so alone after all. Perhaps in this unexpected friendship with Mrs. Charlotte, she had found not just a refuge but something even more precious, a family. "Thank you," she whispered, the words thick with emotion and gratitude. "Mrs. Charlotte responded with a gentle smile, a smile that promised not just comfort, but resilience and a path forward. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, life at Mrs. Charlotte's cabin became routine, but it was a routine that Sophie grew to cherish. Each morning, she woke early, often to the sound of William's soft coos. Those early hours were filled with simple joys, feeding and changing William, delighting in his smiles and laughter. Then she would join Mrs. Charlotte for breakfast, where they shared warm, hearty meals and planned their day together. The cabin and its surroundings required constant attention: laundry to be washed, meals to be cooked, rooms to be cleaned, and a garden to be tended. Sophie threw herself into these tasks with a newfound purpose, each completed chore giving her a sense of accomplishment and grounding her in this new life. At first, Sophie's hands, once soft and unaccustomed to physical labor, became rough and blistered. But over time they toughened, just as her spirit did. Mrs. Charlotte was always there, a constant and comforting presence, guiding Sophie through the practicalities of this simpler, yet more demanding life. She taught her how to make a rich chicken broth from scratch, how to mend a tear in William's clothes, and how to soothe a baby's cries with nothing more than a gentle touch and a lullaby. But beyond these practical lessons, Mrs. Charlotte imparted something even more valuable: her wisdom and companionship. During the long, quiet afternoons, while William napped, Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte would sit together, sipping tea and talking. Mrs. Charlotte would share stories from her past, tales of the hardships she had faced, and how she had found ways to overcome them. "Life is never easy, my child," she would say, her eyes twinkling with the light of hard-earned wisdom. "But we are stronger than we think. You are stronger than you think." Sophie listened to these words, letting them take root in her heart. And as the days passed, she began to believe they might be true. There were still moments when the pain of Sam's betrayal would resurface, hitting her like a wave and leaving her breathless and lost. Moments when she would look at William and feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. How could she raise him alone? How could she be both mother and father to this little boy who deserved so much? But whenever those dark thoughts crept in, Mrs. Charlotte was there, offering a shoulder to cry on or a quiet word of encouragement. Slowly, Sophie found herself able to push those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the present, on the life she was building here in the forest. There was a peace in this life that Sophie had never known before. The silence of the forest, the rhythm of daily tasks, and the comforting presence of Mrs. Charlotte all brought a sense of belonging that she hadn't realized she was missing. She watched William grow and change, his babbling turning into words, his first wobbly steps becoming confident strides. In him she saw hope, saw the future she was working so hard to build. And as time went on, Sophie began to see that hope and future for herself as well. She started to imagine a life beyond the pain and betrayal, a life that was simple yet fulfilling, filled with the quiet joys of raising her son and living close to the earth. A life where the past no longer held her captive, where she could find happiness and purpose in the small, everyday moments. Sophie had found more than just a refuge in this hidden cabin in the forest. She had found a new beginning. As she continued to walk this path, with William by her side and Mrs. Charlotte as her guide, she knew that she was finally moving toward the life she deserved, a life filled with love, strength, and the kind of peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. As the years rolled on, the forest cabin became more than just a refuge. It became a place where a small family was forged from love, hardship, and mutual support. One day, as Sophie was hanging the freshly washed laundry to dry under the warm, dappled sunlight, Mrs. Charlotte approached her. For a few moments they stood side by side in silence, taking in the serene beauty of the forest around them. The birds sang softly from the treetops, and the gentle rustling of leaves provided a calming soundtrack to the peaceful afternoon. Mrs. Charlotte finally broke the silence, her voice a blend of gentle assurance and unwavering strength. "You're doing a good job, Sophie," she said, her words carrying the weight of her genuine admiration. "With William, with everything. I hope you know that." Sophie turned to look at Mrs. Charlotte, her heart swelling with gratitude. At that moment, she realized how much she had come to rely on this strong, wise woman who had taken her in without question. They weren't connected by blood, but their bond had grown into something far more profound. They were family in every sense of the word that mattered. Years passed, and William blossomed into a bright and inquisitive young boy, his mind sharp and eager to absorb the world around him. Under Sophie's tender care and Mrs. Charlotte's wise guidance, William flourished, much like a young tree thriving under the warmth of the sun. Sophie was determined to give him the best education she could, even though they lived far from any school. The cabin became his classroom, the forest his playground, and Mrs. Charlotte his tutor in the ways of the natural world. From an early age, Sophie introduced William to the joys of reading, using the few cherished books Mrs. Charlotte had collected over the years. Together, they journeyed through the pages of classics like Don Quixote and the Iliad, Sophie patiently explaining the stories and concepts as they went along. But it was Mrs. Charlotte who truly sparked William's love for learning with her vast knowledge of the natural world that surrounded them. She would often take him on long, leisurely walks through the forest, pointing out the various plants and creatures that called it home. "Look, William," she would say, crouching down to examine a tiny sprout pushing its way through the soil. "This is an oak seedling. It may be small now, but one day it will grow into a mighty tree." William's eyes would widen with wonder, his young mind buzzing with questions. How does it grow so big? What does it need to survive? How long does it take, he would ask, his curiosity insatiable. Mrs. Charlotte would smile, her eyes twinkling with delight at his enthusiasm. "Those are excellent questions, William. Let's discover the answers together." And so they would spend hours exploring the forest, examining leaves, studying soil, and discussing the mysteries of the natural world. William soaked up every bit of knowledge like a sponge, always eager for more. His fascination with nature only grew as he did, and he spent countless hours wandering through the woods, observing the behavior of insects, collecting rocks and plants, and recording his observations in his many notebooks. Sometimes Sophie worried about his intensity, about the way he could lose himself in his thoughts, scribbling furiously in his journals as if the world outside didn't exist. "Is it normal?" she would ask Mrs. Charlotte, concern lacing her voice as she watched her son, head bent over his work. "Shouldn't he be playing with other children, doing the things that kids his age do?" But Mrs. Charlotte would simply shake her head with a wise, understanding smile. "William is special, Sophie. His mind works differently. It's a gift, not something to be stifled. He needs to explore his interests, to feed that curiosity, not suppress it." Sophie learned to embrace her son's unique way of seeing the world. She nurtured his passions, encouraging his discoveries and marveling at the depth of his understanding. Whenever she made the rare trip into town, she would return with books she thought might interest him, asking him questions about his latest observations and listening with pride as he shared his thoughts on the wonders of the natural world. It wasn't a conventional childhood, but it was one filled with love, exploration, and wonder. Despite the richness of his life in the forest, there were moments when William yearned for more. He would watch the birds as they soared above the trees, dreaming of the world beyond the borders of his small, familiar universe. One day, as he was helping Mrs. Charlotte pull weeds from the garden, he finally voiced the longing that had been growing inside him. "Mrs. Charlotte." He began hesitantly, his voice betraying the weight of his thoughts. "Do you think I'll ever be able to go to a real school, to learn things I can't learn here?" Mrs. Charlotte paused her work, sitting back on her heels to look at him with her kind, serious eyes. "Is that what you want, William? To go somewhere else and learn new things?" William hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I think so. There's so much I want to know, so much I want to see." A gentle sigh escaped Mrs. Charlotte's lips, but it was not one of disappointment. Rather, it was the sigh of a woman who understood the inevitable passage of time and the desires of a growing boy. "I always knew we couldn't keep you here forever," she said, her voice tinged with both pride and a touch of sadness. "You have a destiny bigger than this forest, William." She reached out and took his hands, her rough, calloused palms warm against his. "If that's what you want, then we will help you achieve it, your mother and I. Because your happiness is all we've ever wanted." William looked at her, his heart swelling with gratitude and love for the woman who had become a second mother to him. "Thank you, Mrs. Charlotte," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "Mrs. Charlotte smiled, her eyes sparkling with the wisdom of someone who had seen much of life. "You're a bright boy, William. You're meant for great things. But never forget where you came from and who you are. This forest, this cabinet will always be a part of you, just as you'll always be a part of us." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the garden, William felt a profound sense of connection to the land and the people who had raised him. He knew that whatever the future held, he would carry the lessons of the forest, the love of his mother, and the wisdom of Mrs. Charlotte with him wherever he went. And with that knowledge, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing he was supported by a family that loved him unconditionally. William felt his world tilt as the weight of his mother's words sank in. The man he had imagined all his life, the father who he believed had passed away, had instead abandoned them in a moment of doubt and mistrust. The revelation was like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of him. He had grown up without a father, but always with the assumption that it was due to tragedy, not betrayal. He continued pacing, his mind a whirl of emotions, confusion, anger, pain, and something else he couldn't quite identify. It was as if the foundation of his identity had suddenly shifted, leaving him unsteady and unsure of where he stood. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he finally asked, his voice thick with the turmoil he felt inside. Sophie, still seated, looked at him with tear-filled eyes, her heart breaking all over again as she saw the pain in her son's face. "I wanted to protect you," she whispered. "I thought it was easier for you to believe he was gone, that you wouldn't have to carry the burden of knowing the truth. I didn't want you to feel the hurt and rejection that I felt." William stopped pacing and turned to face his mother. He could see the anguish in her eyes, the guilt she had carried for so long. At that moment, he realized how much she had sacrificed to shield him from the harsh realities of their past. His anger softened, replaced by a deep sadness for what she had endured alone. He walked over to her and knelt, taking her hands in his. "Mom, you've done so much for me. You gave up your dreams and your life to make sure I had everything I needed. I can't imagine how hard that must have been, carrying this all by yourself." Sophie shook her head, fresh tears spilling over. "You were worth it, William. You are my everything. I never regretted a single moment." William squeezed her hands, feeling a surge of love for this woman who had been both mother and father to him. "I don't know what to say. I'm angry, yes, but not at you. I'm angry at him for what he did to us, for what he put you through. But I'm also grateful. Grateful that you were strong enough to keep going, to give me a life filled with love and purpose." Sophie looked at her son, seeing in him the same strength and determination that had gotten her through those dark days. "I wanted to tell you before you left, because I didn't want you to go out into the world with a lie. You deserve to know the truth, even if it's painful. And I want you to know that no matter where you go or what you do, I am so proud of you. I always will be." William nodded, his emotions still swirling but feeling more anchored by his mother's words. "I'm glad you told me, Mom. It hurts, but I needed to know. And I want you to know that I'll never let what he did define who I am or what I become." Sophie's tears fell freely now, but they were mixed with pride and relief. "You are so much stronger than I ever was, William. You have a heart full of compassion and a mind full of brilliance. I know you will achieve great things." They hugged tightly, both of them drawing strength from each other. It was a moment of healing, a bridge between the past and the future that lay before them. As the evening drew in, and the stars began to peek through the canopy of the forest, they sat together in silence, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. William knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that he carried within him the legacy of his mother's resilience and Mrs. Charlotte's wisdom. He had been shaped by the love of these two remarkable women, and that would be his foundation as he stepped into the world beyond the forest. The next morning, as William prepared to leave for university, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The future was wide open before him, full of possibilities and challenges. Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte stood by the door, watching as he loaded his bags into the car that would take him to the next chapter of his life. Mrs. Charlotte placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch grounding and comforting. "Remember, William, you are never alone. The forest, the cabin, this home, it will always be here for you, and so will we." William nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He turned to his mother, who was trying her best to hold back tears. "I'll make you proud, Mom, I promise." Sophie smiled, though her eyes were brimming with tears. "You already have, my love. You already have." With one last embrace, William got into the car and waved as it drove away. As he looked back at the cabin, growing smaller in the distance, he felt a deep connection to the place that had shaped him, to the people who had loved him unconditionally. He was leaving, but he knew he would carry this place with him wherever he went. And as the road stretched out before him, William felt ready to take on the world, pursue his dreams, and carve out his place in a world much bigger than the one he had known. He was no longer just a boy from the forest, he was a young man with a purpose, a heart full of love, and a future waiting to be written. As the days passed and Sam recovered, William's thoughts often returned to their encounter. There was an undeniable curiosity about Sam, the man he had saved. His dinner invitation was an unexpected twist, one that stirred emotions William had long kept at bay. The night of the dinner arrived, and William found himself standing outside Sam's home, a modest but well-kept house with a warm glow emanating from the windows. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what might be a challenging evening. After all, he was about to meet the man who had once been a distant figure in his past, someone whose actions had left a deep mark on his life. Sam greeted him at the door with a broad smile, his face still marked by the fatigue of his recovery, but also by genuine warmth. "Welcome, Doctor," he said, shaking William's hand firmly. "I'm glad you could make it." Inside, William was greeted by Sam's family, a mix of warmth and curiosity. Sam's wife, Mary, had prepared a hearty meal, and the atmosphere was inviting. William took his place at the table, feeling a sense of being welcomed, despite the strange circumstances. As the evening unfolded, conversations flowed easily. Sam's children were lively and full of questions, and Mary's hospitality made William feel at ease. They talked about many things: family life, the hospital, and even some lighthearted stories. William shared anecdotes from his time in university and his experiences at the hospital, finding himself enjoying the company more than he had anticipated. As dessert was served, Sam cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "I want to thank you again, William. You did more than just save my life, you've given me a second chance. And tonight I want to explain why that's so important." William looked at Sam, intrigued. "Go on," he said. Sam took a deep breath, his expression growing serious. "There's something I need to confess. I've kept it hidden for a long time, but you deserve to know the truth. The reason I was so determined to have you here tonight is because I am your father." The room fell silent as the weight of Sam's words settled over the table. William stared at Sam, his mind racing to process what he had just heard. The man he had saved, the man who had been a stranger, was his father. "I know this must come as a shock," Sam continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I left you and your mother because I was unable to understand or accept what was happening. but I've regretted my actions every day since then. I had hoped that one day I could make amends, but time slipped away." William's emotions were a tangled mess of confusion, anger, and a flicker of something he had not expected: hope. He had spent years feeling the absence of a father, and now, here was Sam offering an explanation and a chance for reconciliation. He looked at Sam, his voice trembling. "Why should I believe you now? After all these years, why should I trust that you truly want to make amends?" Sam's eyes were filled with tears, his voice earnest. "I understand your doubt, and I can't undo the past. But I want to try. I want to be part of your life if you're willing to give me a chance. I know I've lost so much time, but I am here now, and I am truly sorry for everything." William felt a deep inner struggle. He had built his life on the strength and support of Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte. They had been his anchors, his guiding lights. But now, he was faced with a choice whether to embrace this unexpected part of his past or to continue forward with the family that had shaped him. He took a deep breath, looking around at Sam's family, seeing the sincerity in their eyes. After a moment of silence, he nodded slowly. "I appreciate your honesty, Sam. I need time to process all of this, but I am willing to start by getting to know you. I want to understand more about the man who was my father and why things happened the way they did." Sam's face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, William. I know it won't be easy, and I understand if it takes time. But I am here, and I want to be part of your life." The evening continued with a tentative but hopeful atmosphere. William knew that the road ahead would be complicated and filled with emotional hurdles. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of closure beginning to form, a chance to reconcile the past with the present and to navigate a new chapter in his life. As he left Sam's home later that night, William felt a mix of emotions. The journey ahead was uncertain, but he knew that he was no longer alone in his quest for understanding and healing. He carried with him not just the weight of his past, but also the possibility of a future where he could build new connections and make sense of the legacy he had inherited. The path forward would be challenging, but with the support of his mother, Mrs. Charlotte, and now a father who sought redemption, William felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. He was ready to face whatever came next, guided by the lessons of his past and the promise of a future filled with new beginnings. As Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte stepped out of the car, they were greeted by William and Lucy, who were eager to help them settle into their new home. The house, nestled in a quiet neighborhood not far from the city, was surrounded by lush greenery and had a welcoming feel to it. William immediately took charge of the heavy lifting, while Lucy directed Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte to where they could start unpacking and organizing. The day was filled with laughter and lighthearted chatter, making the transition feel less like a movie and more like the beginning of a new chapter. Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte quickly found their rhythm in the new house. The space was different from the cabin but offered its charm. The open kitchen became a hub of activity, where Sophie and Lucy bonded over cooking and shared recipes, their laughter blending with the clinking of pots and pans. As the weeks passed, the house began to feel like home. Sophie's garden, with its fresh herbs and vibrant flowers, added a touch of familiarity. Mrs. Charlotte's cozy corner for reading and reflection brought a sense of calm. William and Lucy took care to create a warm, inviting space for everyone, filling it with family photos, mementos from their lives, and a few new touches to symbolize their shared future. One evening, as the sun set and the first stars began to twinkle, William gathered everyone in the living room. They had decided to host a small housewarming party, inviting close friends and colleagues. The room was filled with the hum of conversation and the clinking of glasses, a celebration of new beginnings. During a lull in the festivities, William took a moment to reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. He looked around at the faces of his family and friends, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. Sophie, who was chatting with some guests, caught his eye and smiled. Lucy, standing beside him, squeezed his hand. "How are you feeling?" she asked softly. William looked at her, his eyes filled with warmth. "Content," he said, "and grateful. I know there will be challenges ahead, but I feel like we're on the right path." Lucy nodded, her gaze drifting around the room. "We're building something special here, William. A home filled with love and new memories." The night went on with laughter, toasts, and the exchange of heartfelt stories. It was a celebration of family, love, and the future they were all building together. William's heart swelled with happiness as he saw Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte mingling with their new friends, their faces glowing with the same warmth and joy that filled the house. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, William and Lucy found themselves alone with Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte. The four of them sat together in the living room, basking in the soft glow of the lamps and the sense of accomplishment that permeated the air. Sophie looked at William with a smile that spoke of both pride and contentment. "Thank you for bringing us here, William. This place is beautiful, and it feels like home already." William hugged her tightly. "I'm just glad we could make this happen. I couldn't have done it without you and Mrs. Charlotte, and I'm so glad you're here with us." Mrs. Charlotte placed a comforting hand on Sophie's shoulder. "We're here, and we're excited for what the future holds. This house is more than just walls and rooms. It's a place where we'll create new memories together." With a final embrace and a shared sense of hope, the family settled into their new home, ready to face the future as a united and loving family. William knew that life would continue to present its challenges, but he also knew that with the support and love of his family, he was ready to meet them head-on. Amelia's gaze was steady as she took in William, her eyes betraying a mix of curiosity and something deeper, something almost analytical. "Doctor William," she said, her voice steady and measured, "thank you for saving my grandson. He's the only family I have left." William nodded, his smile polite, but tinged with a hint of discomfort. "It was my privilege, Mrs. Amelia. I'm glad to see he's doing well." Sam's grandmother studied William for a moment longer before giving a slow nod. "Well, then," she said, "let's not dwell on the past. We're here to enjoy a meal and celebrate." As dinner progressed, William found himself surprisingly at ease, despite Amelia's earlier scrutiny. The meal was delicious, a mix of traditional dishes and some that were uniquely Sam's family recipes. Amelia's presence, though somewhat intimidating, added a layer of gravitas to the evening. She shared stories from Sam's childhood, tales of resilience and love that had shaped him into the person William had come to know. During a lull in the conversation, Amelia turned to William with a thoughtful expression. "You know," she said, "it's not often we meet someone who makes a real difference in another's life. Sam has told me about your work and your dedication. It's rare to find someone who combines skill with such compassion." William felt a warmth in Amelia's words, a validation that was both humbling and gratifying. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere. "It means a lot to hear that." The evening continued with laughter and camaraderie. William and Sam's family talked about their shared interests and future aspirations. William felt a genuine connection with Sam's family, despite the initial apprehension. As the night came to a close and the guests began to depart, Amelia approached William with a soft smile. "Dr. William," she said quietly, "I want you to know that you've done more than save a life. You've given us hope and strength. Sam is a part of my world, and seeing him so full of life and promise is a gift beyond measure." William was touched by Amelia's words. "I'm just glad to be part of that story," he replied. As he left Sam's house, William reflected on the evening. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a deeper appreciation for the connections he was forging, and a growing anticipation for the future he was building with Lucy, Sophie, and Mrs. Charlotte. Back at his own home, he found Lucy in the garden, carefully tending to the newly planted seedlings. The sight of her, surrounded by the vibrant colors of the garden, brought a smile to his face. He joined her, his thoughts drifting to the new life they were about to bring into the world. "How was dinner?" Lucy asked, looking up from her work. "It was enlightening," William said, his tone thoughtful. "I felt welcomed and appreciated. Sam's family is wonderful, and Amelia. She has a way of making you see things from a new perspective." Lucy wiped her hands on a towel and took William's hand in hers. "I'm glad to hear that. It sounds like you had a meaningful evening." William nodded, squeezing her hand. "I did, and it makes me even more excited about the future, about what's coming next for us." As they stood together in the garden, surrounded by the fruits of their labor and the promise of new beginnings, William felt a deep sense of contentment. The future was full of possibilities, and with Lucy by his side and his family close, he knew he was ready to embrace whatever came next. William sat in stunned silence as Amelia's story unfolded, the pieces of a complex puzzle coming together in a way he had never imagined. The resemblance between him and the man Amelia had loved was striking, but it was the emotional weight of her words that left him reeling. The implications were profound, connecting his past with Sam's in ways he had never considered. Amelia's confession had cast a shadow over the evening. Sam's face was a mixture of shock, confusion, and anger. He looked at William with a new perspective, as if trying to reconcile the image of the man who had saved his life with the legacy of a secret love affair. Amelia's tears spoke of regret and sorrow, the burden of a past she had tried to leave behind but could not entirely escape. The silence in the room was thick with unspoken questions and emotions. William, trying to process the revelation, finally broke the silence. "Amelia, I don't know what to say. This is all so overwhelming." Amelia nodded, her expression a mix of relief and anguish. "I understand. It was a long time ago, but the past has a way of catching up with us. I wanted to tell you the truth because you deserve to know where you come from." Sam, still grappling with the revelation, spoke up, his voice shaky but firm. "Grandma, this changes everything. I need time to process this." William interrupted gently. "Sam, I understand. This is a lot to take in. I appreciate your honesty, Amelia. It's a lot to absorb." Amelia nodded, her gaze softening. "I'm sorry for any pain this has caused. I never meant for the past to intrude on your lives." The rest of the evening was spent in somber reflection. Sam and William exchanged occasional glances, the bond between them now tainted by the weight of their shared history. Amelia retreated into a quieter corner of the room, her emotions raw and exposed. As the night drew to a close, William and Sam found themselves standing at the door, the weight of the evening still heavy between them. "I'm sorry if I've caused any trouble," William said quietly, his voice sincere. Sam looked at him, his expression conflicted but softened by the shared understanding of the evening's impact. "No trouble, just a lot to think about." William nodded. "I understand. Let's give it some time." The drive back home was filled with quiet contemplation. William and Lucy sat in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Lucy finally broke the silence, her voice gentle and soothing. "How are you holding up?" William sighed deeply. "It's overwhelming. I never expected anything like this, but I suppose maybe it's a chance to understand more about who I am and where I come from." Lucy reached over and took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You're not alone in this. We'll face it together." As they arrived home, the quiet comfort of their own space offered a reprieve from the emotional turbulence of the evening. William and Lucy embraced, finding solace in each other's presence. The future seemed uncertain, but the strength of their relationship and the support of their loved ones provided a beacon of hope. In the days that followed, William and Sam kept in touch, slowly beginning to navigate their new reality. The revelations of that evening had altered their lives, but they were determined to face the future with courage and understanding. As William and Lucy continued to build their life together, they did so with a newfound appreciation for the complexities of family and the strength found in facing the past. The room was thick with a mix of shock, sorrow, and unresolved feelings. Amelia's revelation had shattered the calm facade of the evening, leaving everyone grappling with the weight of the truth that had been hidden for so long. Amelia, standing by the window, continued to speak, her voice tremulous but determined. "I know this is hard to hear, Sam. I should have told you the truth a long time ago. I was wrong to keep it from you. But please understand, it was never out of malice. It was out of fear and the constraints of a world that demanded secrecy." Sam, still grappling with the revelations, looked at William with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You must understand, William, this changes everything. The man who was supposed to be my grandfather, the one who raised me, he was living with a lie. And now, I'm faced with the reality that my family is entangled in a web of secrets." William nodded, his heart aching for both Sam and Amelia. "I understand, Sam. My journey has been marked by the absence of my father. This revelation, it makes sense in a way, but it also opens up new wounds." Lucy, who had been quietly observing the turmoil, stepped forward. Her voice was gentle yet firm. "Amelia, you made choices based on the world you lived in, and while those choices have led to pain, they were made in a time of great difficulty. We can't change the past, but we can choose how to move forward from here." Amelia turned towards Lucy, her eyes reflecting a deep gratitude. "Thank you, Lucy. I've always respected you for your compassion. I wish things had been different, but I'm grateful for the chance to finally be honest." The tension in the room began to shift slightly as the group started to focus on the possibility of reconciliation. Sam took a deep breath, his anger slowly giving way to a more contemplative sadness. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice softer. "How do we navigate this new reality?" William placed a comforting hand on Sam's shoulder. "We start by acknowledging the pain and the history. We need to talk openly and honestly, allowing ourselves the space to grieve and to heal." Amelia, her tears finally drying, nodded in agreement. "I want to make amends, to rebuild the trust that's been broken. I understand if it takes time. I'm here, ready to do whatever it takes." The conversation continued, moving from the shock of the revelation to a more practical approach to dealing with the aftermath. They discussed ways to honor James's memory and the impact of his life on the family. Amelia shared more about James and their past, and William talked about his experiences growing up without a father, hoping to bridge the gap created by the secret. As the evening drew to a close, the group found themselves in a tentative but hopeful place. The bonds between them had been tested and reshaped, but there was a shared commitment to understanding and healing. William and Lucy said their goodbyes, and as they left Sam's house, the air was filled with a mix of relief and uncertainty. They knew the road ahead would be challenging, but they also felt a renewed sense of connection, forged through shared history and the courage to face the past. In the days and weeks that followed, the family worked through their emotions and began to build a new foundation. They learned to embrace their complex history, finding strength in their shared experiences and a deeper understanding of each other. The tension in the waiting room was palpable as Sam sat anxiously, the weight of the day's revelations and Amelia's sudden medical emergency pressing heavily on him. William, though exhausted, remained focused on his duty, his medical expertise bringing Amelia back from the brink. William, still feeling the emotional toll of the day, nodded. "It's what any doctor would do, but I appreciate your words. Amelia's health is the priority now. We need to focus on her recovery." Sam sat quietly in the waiting room, reflecting on the day's events. The revelations about his family's history and the confrontation with William had left him emotionally drained. The realization of his own mistakes and the impact of those mistakes on William's life weighed heavily on him. Hours later, Amelia began to regain consciousness. William stood by her side, monitoring her progress. When she finally opened her eyes, her gaze met his with a mixture of relief and sadness. "William," she whispered weakly, "thank you. I don't know how to repay you for what you've done." William offered a reassuring smile, though his eyes were tired. "There's no need for repayment, Amelia. Just focus on getting better." As Amelia began her recovery, the atmosphere in the hospital slowly shifted. The confrontation and the subsequent medical emergency laid bare many truths, but they also opened the door to healing and understanding. Over the next few days, Amelia's condition improved, and she was able to speak with both William and Sam more openly. The conversations were fraught with emotion, but they also provided a path toward reconciliation. Sam and William began to find common ground, driven by the shared goal of supporting Amelia and healing the wounds of the past. Amelia, with the help of her family, took steps to address the secrets and regrets of her past. She made amends with those she had hurt and sought to build a new relationship with William, acknowledging the pain her choices had caused but also expressing a sincere desire to be a part of his life. William, for his part, remained guarded but open to the possibility of rebuilding some form of connection with Sam. He recognized that while forgiveness was a personal journey, it also had the potential to pave the way for new beginnings. The weeks that followed were marked by a gradual, tentative process of healing. Amelia's recovery was slow but steady, and as she regained her strength, she focused on repairing the relationships that had been strained by years of secrecy and betrayal. Sam and William continued to navigate their complex emotions, working towards a place of mutual understanding and respect. The journey was not without its challenges, but it was also marked by moments of connection and hope. In the end, the events of that fateful day became a catalyst for change and reconciliation. The family, though scarred by the past, found a way to move forward, building a new chapter based on honesty, forgiveness, and the enduring strength of their connections. William took a deep breath, gathering the courage to share the weight of the revelations he had carried for so long. "Mom," he began, his voice steady but soft, "there are things I need to tell you about our family. Things that Amelia shared with me before she passed away." Sophie looked at him with a mixture of worry and curiosity, her eyes reflecting the depth of her love and concern for her son. "What is it, William? What did she tell you?" William hesitated for a moment, then continued. "Amelia revealed that my father, Sam, was not just a name from the past. He was your first love, and he was also the father of my great-grandfather, James. This means that James, the man Amelia spoke of with such fondness, was my great-grandfather too. It means that I've been connected to a part of my family that I never knew existed." Sophie's eyes widened as she absorbed the shock of William's words. She sat in stunned silence, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. After a long pause, she spoke, her voice filled with a mix of sadness and acceptance. "I had no idea that Sam and Amelia's story was so intertwined with ours. I thought I had left that part of my life behind, but I see now how it all connects." William nodded, feeling a sense of relief mixed with sorrow. It was a lot to take in. "Amelia carried the burden of these secrets for so long, and I wanted you to know the truth, not to hurt you, but to honor the reality of our family's past." Sophie's gaze softened as she reached out to hold William's hand. "Thank you for telling me, William. It must have been difficult to carry such a heavy burden. I'm glad you were able to make peace with Amelia and forgive her. It seems like you've grown a lot through all of this." William gave a small, sad smile. "It has been a challenging journey, but I feel like I've learned more about myself and our family than I ever expected. It's been painful, but it's also been a chance to understand who we are and where we come from." Sophie took a deep breath, her expression reflecting both the pain of the past and the hope for the future. "We'll work through this together, William. It's a lot to process, but we have each other. We can honor Amelia's memory by acknowledging our past and moving forward with understanding." As they embraced, the weight of their shared history began to feel a little lighter. William and Sophie faced the future with a renewed sense of connection, both to their past and to each other. The journey of reconciliation and understanding was just beginning, but they were determined to face it with honesty and compassion. In the days that followed, William and Sophie took steps to integrate the truth about their family into their lives. They began to learn more about their heritage and sought to build new memories, honoring the complex legacy that Amelia's revelations had unveiled. Though the process was gradual and filled with its own set of challenges, they found solace in the strength of their bond and the shared commitment to moving forward with grace and understanding. As William cradled his newborn daughter, he felt a deep sense of renewal and purpose. The trials and revelations of the past had forged a new understanding within him, and now he was ready to embrace the future with hope and determination. Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte shared in the joy of the moment, their eyes shining with pride and affection for the new addition to their family. The love and support they had always offered William were now extended to his daughter, symbolizing the continuity of their family's values and the strength they had cultivated through hardship. Lucy, exhausted but radiant, looked at William with gratitude and love. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. William nodded, his heart swelling with pride. "She is, and she's going to have a wonderful life surrounded by people who love her deeply." Sophie gently touched Lucy's arm. "Congratulations, Lucy. We're so happy for you both, and I promise we'll be here for you and this little one every step of the way." Mrs. Charlotte added, "We've been through a lot, but moments like these remind us of what's truly important: family, love, and the future we can build together." As the days turned into weeks and months, William, Lucy, and their daughter found comfort in their growing family. William's commitment to honoring his past while embracing his present guided him through each day. He and Sophie continued to nurture their relationship, finding strength in their shared experiences and a renewed bond. Sam's attempts at reconciliation remained unanswered, and though William understood his mother's stance, he also carried a sense of compassion for the man who had caused so much pain. The focus remained on creating a positive and loving environment for his daughter and cherishing the family he had built. William took pride in his role as a father, determined to impart the lessons he had learned through his struggles. He wanted his daughter to grow up knowing the importance of resilience, love, and the courage to face challenges head-on. As they celebrated their new beginnings, William felt a deep sense of gratitude for the support and love from Sophie, Mrs. Charlotte, and Lucy. Their unwavering presence had been a guiding light through the darkest times, and together, they looked forward to a future filled with hope, understanding, and the promise of new memories. The legacy of Amelia and the revelations of the past had forged a stronger, more connected family. William, now more resolute than ever, embraced the future with optimism, ready to build a life filled with love, kindness, and the values that had carried them through the trials of their journey. William and Lucy embarked on their new journey of life with their cherished daughter, cocooned in the unwavering support and profound affection provided by Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte. Each day unfolded as a fresh challenge, but it also brimmed with unprecedented opportunities to craft the future they had longed for and dreamed about. William, now propelled by a renewed sense of clarity and purpose, moved forward with an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the steadfast love and constant encouragement that enveloped him. This constant support provided him with a deep and abiding confidence that, irrespective of the hurdles that the future might present, his family was steadfastly prepared to meet them with unity and courage. As he cradled his beloved daughter close to his heart, William gazed at the future with an unwavering sense of hope and determination. He was resolute in his commitment to instill the core values of love, resilience, and inner strength that he had gleaned from Sophie and Mrs. Charlotte. Greetings, everyone. As we conclude this deeply poignant and inspiring tale, we are compelled to reflect on the immense power of resilience, the profound impact of unconditional love, and the critical importance of facing even the harshest truths with unwavering resolve. The journey shared by William, Sophie, and Mrs. Charlotte is a vivid illustration of how love can endure and prevail against the most formidable challenges. Their story vividly captures how the bond between Amelia and James was tested by the harsh reality of racial discrimination, a brutal and distressing experience faced by many. However, through these intense trials, we witnessed how the transformative power of truth and love can overcome even the greatest of obstacles. We eagerly anticipate your presence in our next video. Until then, remain inspired, take care of yourself, and continue to harness the strength and resilience within you to navigate through life's challenges. As we wrap up this deeply moving and thought-provoking journey, we invite you to reflect on the powerful lessons we've explored together. The stories of William, Sophie, and Mrs. Charlotte have demonstrated the remarkable strength of resilience, the transformative nature of unconditional love, and the importance of facing even the most difficult truths with unwavering courage. We want to hear from you. What is one key lesson you've taken away from this story? How do you plan to bring this insight into your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how this narrative has inspired you and what changes you're excited to implement. If you enjoyed this video and found it valuable, please leave your comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you more heartfelt and inspiring stories. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Until then, stay inspired and keep embracing the strength within you.